Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Indira. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show. Thank you so much for taking time out for being a part of this.
Thank you, Jug. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure. So, Indira, right now, you're doing, you run a company called Meraki Trainings, where you founded it, you're the CEO, and then, you cater to a lot of your clients. Before we jump into understanding how Meraki Trainings came about, if you can walk us through your journey up until the point you got into training itself.
Yeah.
And the transition from, working for someone into entrepreneurial journey. If you can talk about these things, I think it'll be great.
Sure. So I would say entrepreneurship was something which was running in my mind right from my college days. It's not something which I thought about yesterday or today.
Okay.
So yeah, I did my engineering from Avinash Lingam University, and then I got placed with HCL. I worked there for a year. And then, as I was working there, it was a BPO, and I had trainers over there who were training us on voice and accent and various things. So that is what actually attracted me to become a trainer, by the way they were explaining and the way, they took the class forward. I thought, yeah, that might be something which I want to become. That is some kind of my calling, is what I felt.
Right.
I applied for IJP in HCL and I wanted to become a trainer there. But then things changed here and there, and then I shifted into freelance training projects because one of my friends referred me to it.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the journey of my training started with that. I started training colleges, and my first training program, I still remember, it was on Feb 13th, 2014 or something.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it was just my first session. I was very new to them. I was myself a pass out from college and I went there. But then with my first session itself, the students were so happy. And, at the end of the session, they literally clapped for me and they said, we want you again and again for the sessions. So that's when I thought, okay, this is my calling. This is what I was actually born for. And I started doing a lot of programs after that. I did a lot of networking. Networking is everything when you're a freelancer. So I connected to various organizations. I remember struggling to get projects, but the challenges which I faced were, I would say that going over there and training, the passion to reach there was more stronger than the challenges which I faced.
Right.
So, the networking which I did, I connected with a lot of people, a lot of I used to randomly call training organizations and ask, do you have programs for me? And then they used to get connected to me, and that is how I connected. I was in Chennai for around 6 or 7 years.
Right.
And I connected to I have trained more than 40 colleges over there. And I've trained more than 25 corporates over there within a span of just, you can say 5 to 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so there was a point where the training had gone down a little. And that is when I thought, okay, let me get into a little safe zone and understand what happens inside the corporate. I know from an outsider as a freelancer what happens. But when I go inside a corporate is when how do they take the vendors? How do they select the trainers? So I wanted to get into the internal part as well before I start up. So that's how I started my journey with one of the corporates in Chennai. And so there I joined as a training manager. I was responsible for the complete organization's training. There were around 400 employees over there. I had to plan literally each and every programs for them. And I was also working as a trainer over there. And that is when I got exposed to, how the internal budgeting of the trainers happens, how they select the trainers and all those things. And later, yes, after that, I moved to various other organizations. I reached the level of head of HR and training. So I thought it's a bit stagnant now. Why don't I just start up my own organization? Because I've gained enough experience to start by myself. I had met a lot of vendors. I know how corporates select vendors. I also know how tough it is to get into the empanelment from the other end. So since I understood both the sides, I thought, okay, let me start up myself. And that is how I started Meraki Training Solutions.
Got it, Indira.
Yeah.
Great, great. Uh, let me go back a little. Your first training you did in 2014 to a college, in a
Hmm.
college, right?
Hmm.
So you said, it was a success.
Yeah,
What do you think clicked there? It's not that you had any experience in stuff, right? It's just the first time.
excellent.
And but before that, before you go and talk about what you think you clicked, first of all, how did you land that particular program? How did you land that project with them? Was it through, because you didn't have any experience before,
Absolutely
and
no. Hmm.
yeah,
So the thing is, it was referred by one of my friends, as I told you.
right.
She knew that I wanted to get into HCL through IJP to the trainer's position. So she helped me out. She came to know that I'm like literally passionate about becoming a trainer. And she said, I have a freelance project. Why don't you give a try for it? So the trainer who had to actually
Ah,
come for that program fell sick and could not go to that program. It was actually a 7 days program, out of which he almost covered all the programs. Just last 2 days were left. So that is when I went in, and maybe they compared me to the previous trainer, or I don't know what exactly. But what I would say when I went first day over there was I was a student all those days. I know what kind of teacher I would expect. I know what a dream teacher would be like, what a dream trainer should be like, what is the expectation from the students. So, yes, that is how I felt I was able to gel with them and understand them better and give them how they wanted to learn rather than how I wanted to train them.
got it, Indira. And what was the broad topic over the period of 7 days? This training, what was it about? It was like a finishing school or helping them for interview. What was it about?
It was kind of finishing school program. So the
Right.
last 2 days which I took was for interview preparation skills and resume writing skills. So since I
Got it.
already had a lot of experience into applying for interviews and I had gone through a lot of interviews, yes, that is how I was also able to explain my experiences and they were able to gel with me.
Got it. How much time did you have? Because this was like a sudden thing, right? The previous
Hmm.
trainer fell sick or
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm.
How much
Hmm.
time did you have to prepare for this training program?
I would say I got the call by evening 7 or something, and next day morning by 8, I had to be in the college. So,
Wow. Okay.
literally, no time. I didn't have any presentations, I didn't have any content. Whatever I spoke was out of my experience and out of the sheer passion to train.
Wow. And this was your first ever training, even though you had the passion within HCL to kind of do the internal job placement, you did not
Yes.
get it, and you hadn't even trained anybody, right? Officially or
Yeah.
formally.
Yeah. So I would say officially, yes, I have not trained, but in college, like I was the one who we are from engineering background, so you know how it works. The previous night we study, next day morning we go and write the exams. So
Yeah.
I used to study the previous day night, and next day morning I used to go and explain everyone on how to write the answers within 10 minutes. The whole subject will be covered by me, and then we have to go and sit and write the exams. So I think those 4 years where I, helped my friends in learning the concepts, that is where I was able to quickly explain the concepts and see that everyone understands.
Amazing. Uh, Now, you said you knew exactly what college students were expecting, right? So
Yeah.
you seem to know something. What are those expectations?
Okay. So the first thing which college students expect is to understand why they are sitting in the program. A lot of students don't know why they are in the program. They just come to the program because they were forced to sit in the classroom. So I always believe that when the why is clear, the how is easy.
Right.
So as soon as I go there, the first thing I do is I break the ice. They feel, okay, who are you? You're a stranger. Why should I even see you, listen to you, talk to you? So, first break the ice by giving an activity, telling a joke, or explaining about who I am and telling about my experiences as a student so that they connect with me in some form.
Right.
So once I do that, once I break the ice, the next thing is to make them understand why they are sitting there. Because me as a student, I was confused on why I was sent to this workshop. Why shouldn't I waste my time? So first thing is I make them understand why they are sitting there, the purpose, and then
Right.
make them understand like what are they going to do the whole day. So you know that you're sitting here for this, but what are you going to do? The next step is when you understand the how, what, why, when, and where of things, it becomes very clear for you to go with the flow.
Right.
So the next thing I do is explain them on what are the topics we are going to cover and how it will be useful for them and what are they supposed to do after they learn this.
Right.
So how are they going to apply this? Is it really useful is the question which they will always have in their mind. So when you explain them how you're going to apply these things, they automatically, they gel with us and they understand why they are sitting there and they start grasping the concepts quicker.
Got it. So what happened after that? So this was like a sudden thing, and how did you build on top of this particular project that you landed?
Okay, so once I complete this project was actually a very huge project. There were around 12 freelance trainers working for that college, and I would say I was the junior most person over there, all gray hairs, and they were all elderly people over there. So
Okay.
I went and I spoke to all of them because I was literally on fire to become a trainer, and that was the only way I can learn how to be a trainer. I knew that was the last chance given to me. So I went and literally spoke to everyone, took everyone's numbers, and I also told them that I wanted to get into the field and I asked them for help. So whenever you want to do something, learn something, get into something, the first thing is you ask. Only then you get those things. So that is the one good thing which I'm happy about, which I did that day. I went and spoke to everyone. I took all their contact numbers. A few of them were also running their own consultancies. So that was such a huge project. So I went, I spoke to them, I took their contacts. They connected me with their friends connected with their friends. So my everyday work literally was to network. Networking was my strength, I could say. And within a span of around 3 to 4 months, I had connect with around 120 trainers in Chennai itself.
Wow.
So I think almost all the trainers in Chennai will know me.
Awesome. And this was after you finished the 2-day workshop for the college students.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. But Indira, you say you connected with 120 trainers, and all of the trainers, are going to be looking for the same kind of projects that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
So how did that, how easy was it to get referrals from your fellow trainers? Because, is it not kind of like a competition?
It was a heavy competition. I'll not say it was not a competition. So, once I connect with the trainers, I also connect with the organizations they are working with. And I sent my resumes left and right to, kind of all the consultancies and organizations I knew.
Right.
I used to call everyone and talk, and I see that they remember my name. Okay, soft skills training, Indra is there. Leadership skills training, Indra is there. Team building training, Indra is there. They should remember my name when they take that training program itself in their mind. So I also used to, whenever I talk to someone, I used to give them a free session kind of, a 5 minutes knowledge sharing kind of, where I used to tell them, you can do like this in the training programs, it'll be very useful. And I used to give suggestions to the consultancies itself, like, you can do these things this way. Now, there were 2 reasons for me to do it. One is to experiment through them, whether that really works. And the other one is to connect with them and understand, make them understand that I am capable of actually taking on the whole project and working. So after a few days, they started putting me as project managers, where I used to go and handle all the 11 trainers who used to come to the program, like maintain their attendance, their feedback, go to the students and collect their feedbacks, testimonial from the clients, and kind of everything. So that was a great exposure for me. And today, when I sit here, even those lessons are helpful to me even today.
Right. You said 3 things, Of course, there must be a lot of things. You said soft skills, Indira, leadership, Indira, and team building. I understand about soft skills and team building. When it comes to leadership training, right? I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Don't you? I think, to be able to provide training on leadership, one needs to have some experience, right? How did you pull off leadership training? Because people who you'll be training will be more experienced than you. And, there could be a little bit of imposter syndrome. How did you tackle and manage that?
Okay. Now, this comes right from my childhood. I won't say it is from that time. So, right from school days, I was the school leader, class leader.
Right.
And I'm gang leader among the friends. So, whichever gang I've been with, I've been with very few gangs. I'm an introvert. I don't talk much. But whichever gang I've been with in colleges or in colonies where I was living, everywhere I was the one who was the gang leader naturally. Like, I didn't go and say that I want to be the leader there. They just chose me as their leader. And I think that comes, leadership is a skill, it's an art, and it is not something which is learned. Yes, experiences do help build your leadership skills, but there are some things which come naturally to you and you build over that. So the foundation of leadership was already laid for me.
Right.
And I learned a lot through the training programs which I gave for leadership skills, because I got to meet with a lot of people who are in the leadership level, and they used to give me challenges like, I used to face this, how will I resolve this? Now, these are questions which only an experienced person could answer, is the feeling I also had till I reached that level. But once in the classroom, when they suddenly asked this question, I could relate it back to how I would have resolved an issue like that, because I already was kind of a leader informally, if not formally.
Right.
So that is what helped me basically.
Great. Interesting thing is, you said you're an introvert,
Yeah.
but you're great at networking. I know extroverts also struggle at networking.
Okay.
How?
So,
I mean,
so the advantage of being an introvert is you are selective in what you're talking, and you are to the point when you talk to a person. So that helps you network
right.
better.
Right. Wow, that's a great perspective. Because I was of the impression that, introverts just are within themselves, they just go to a corner, sit by themselves, don't talk unless spoken to. Extroverts are the person. But I never looked at it from this perspective, where introvert speak just what is needed, talk what is needed. And one of the cons of extroverts are that they may be talking things that are not needed. Trust me, this is something that I'm thinking like this right now. I've never looked at it from this way. Amazing. I hope a lot of introverts get some encouragement from this particular thing that you spoke.
Absolutely. And if for your information, just a fact that around 80% of CEOs are introverts.
Wow.
It's a shocking fact, but that is a
It
fact.
is. It is. Yeah. I can think of some CEOs and relate that they'd be introverts, but great. This is literally like, what you said is literally like one punchline. It's the highlight quote of this podcast already. Okay, great. Okay, you said that, you kind of sent resumes left, right, and center, and you kind of established that name, the brand association. Okay, these trainings and brand stuff. What I loved about what you spoke earlier was you decided to go join a company to understand how, they choose the vendors. I think that was an amazing move, first of all. Can you share that experience? What are the things that you picked up in as much depth as possible? This will be really valuable for aspiring trainers out there.
Sure. So, like with various organizations, there were various facts. Now, when I take a trainer for my organization, suppose like when I was working in a corporate, when I look for trainers, the first thing I would look for is, are they really into those skill sets? Because there are a lot of people who say I'm a soft skills trainer, but they themselves do not have the soft skills. So I took literally 3 to 4 rounds to understand on their behavior level, to understand on their ability to train what they have in them. There are a lot of people who are really good, who understand a lot of concepts, but cannot make the other person understand what they are trying to tell. So I tested them on that part. There are a lot of people who will tell that, these are the things you should do. This is how you should be. This is corporate etiquette. This is left etiquette. This is email etiquette. But they don't follow what they say. It's like a subject which they go train and come back. Now, so I had to test them on literally whether they are also applying what they are talking. So when I tell them to send an email, are they really sending it the way it should be sent? Is that the person who can actually train my employees on email etiquette? So I used to test them based on their application of what they know and the ability to communicate on whether what they are telling is also what they are actually trying to tell, and whether it is matching with the skill set which is actually required for the organization. So like we say, we want a trainer for corporate etiquette, but this person will only know, like, basic soft skills which he would have done for college programs, and he will come and claim that he's a soft skills trainer. So I used to have a lot of checkpoints which helped me realize that not all trainers are actually people who can get into this field. And the second thing which I realized is a lot of corporates go by budget. I know, like, it's really hurting to tell this even, because there are a lot of people who are of really high quality, but I could not take them because my CEO did not approve because of the high budget. Then, I mean, it was really hurting, but I did not have a choice. But this happened only first 2 or 3 times. Then I went and told the CEO directly, see, you have conducted 3 programs till now. This is the budget you took for taking these trainers. Look at the quality they have given. Now, if you would have just given me one program with the complete budget, I would have just finished this with that trainer, and the results would have been completely different from what you're seeing today. So after that is when they accepted that, okay, budget doesn't matter, it is the quality which matters. And yeah, I did bring in a huge change in the organization through that. And a lot of quality trainers were taken after that, and the programs actually went on well. So it depends a lot on the internal HR who is working over there, whether that person is able to understand the value of training and the value of paying rightly to the trainers.
Got it, Indra. So, Indra, there was a time that you spent. How long did you spend before joining a company in the training department as a freelance trainer?
Around 3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years, right? Now, you would have had a certain idea about this is how selection of trainers from corporates happen, colleges happen, and stuff like that. What are the ideas that you had in 3 to 4 years that you kind of broke after you joined the corporate? Were there massive changes? Did you, big realizations and stuff?
One big realization which I had is it helped me build my confidence a lot, actually. Earlier I thought I was not selected because I didn't have the right skill sets, but there are several reasons why you're not selected. Sometimes the program gets cancelled, the CEO doesn't approve the budget sometimes they get busy with their own project works, because of which the HR is not able to conduct the program. And there are various internal reasons, but when I was a freelancer, I used to think, yeah, the only problem is because I didn't have the right skill set, or I put too much costing more than what I should have actually put, because of which they rejected me. No, it's not at all like that in a corporate. It may be sometimes like that, but most of the times it is because they have their own internal problems, because of which they are not able to conduct the training. A lot of corporates don't understand the value of training until it literally hits them, and they are in a verge to, yes, now if we don't take up the training program, our whole organization is going to get affected. That's when they get serious about the training and they start pulling in people and they start doing.
Got it. So Indra, now let's say, for example, a training, who initiates the need for training in a typical corporate setup?
Okay. Sometimes it is the project manager who understands that their team is going down because they don't have the skill set to do it.
Got it.
And so there are 2 types of training. One is a fresher training, which happens like campus to corporate kind of. Once they enter the organization, they need to have a 15 days to 20 days training, induction programs kind of, and then they get in. So that training is something which has to happen, otherwise they don't understand what's a corporate. And the other kind of training is where the skill set is suddenly lagging among the people, and the CEO or the project manager, whoever is heading that team, realizes that there is a need for training. At least let them get trained and get into things. It's not possible to always fire a person. You always have to give them a chance. You have to train them, and then you decide on things.
Got it. Now, is it that, companies or corporates, is it either they have in-house trainers or they hire trainers from outside, or is it a mix of both?
It is usually a mix of both. So what happens inside a corporate is they have in-house trainers for programs which run continuously, like induction program batches. They run continuously and they need a trainer who will actually be there and do the programs.
Right.
But there are specific skill sets for which you will need, like you don't need a leadership skills trainer always as an in-house trainer. You just need them as a freelancer who just comes, does the leadership skills training maybe once in a month, and goes back. So
Got
it
it.
completely depends on the skill set.
Got it, Indira. Now, Indira, once a request for training is raised by the concerned stakeholder, let's say project manager or anybody, it's obviously sent to the HR, right? The request is sent to the HR, or is it that sometimes the people who are raising requests, do they recommend trainers sometimes that I know a trainer, can you like bring him on board to train on this topic to the people, or is it purely from the HR it goes out?
It happens both ways. So there are organizations which have an L&D head where they have a separate learning and development department. So in those cases, it goes to the L&D head. Otherwise, it goes to the HR department where they can actually get the trainers for them. Now, when a person comes and requests that there's a vendor and we want to take up this vendor, yes, absolutely, we put them under preference because it's recommended by the person who actually wants the training itself. So he will know the value of that project.
Right.
So we do go with them, but then we also test their skill set and check out whether their skill set and their budget match with what we are actually looking for.
Got it. But who would be the final approving stakeholders? Is it just one person that decision lies with, or is it like a group decision that takes place?
It usually depends on the organization. So, mostly it is the CEO who makes the decision, but the CEO always has a person who can actually make the decision for him. So yes, wherever I have been, in my personal experience, I used to be the decision maker. I used to decide because I used to take things to the next level where I used to even see their behavior, whether they're able to apply, whether they're able to train what they're actually talking about. So my selection process was really in depth, and so they used to leave the decision in my hands.
Got it, Indira. Now, let's say, for example, there is a training requirement that comes up, and then they totally leave it to the HR. Let's say. Now, what's the first step that the HR does? The HR, do they have a certain process? Do they go post it on job sites, or do they use their network?
Okay. So yes, they do use their networks. They put it in a lot of WhatsApp groups. They put it in LinkedIn, and they put it in as many sources as they know. And they try to connect with the old vendors which they already have. So first thing, as soon as they get a requirement, the first thing they do is connect with the current vendors. In case all the vendors say, no, we cannot do it, that is when they go ahead and ask them itself to suggest for someone else who can do it instead of them. And then only we go outside where we go to LinkedIn or put it in other places.
Got it. So basically, if somebody wants to go train in a company, they need to be registered, empaneled as a vendor. Absolutely. So and that empanelment, is that a very tedious process?
It is tedious depending on the organization. So to empanel with huge organizations, like I wanted to empanel with Deloitte, the process is still going on for more than a month because it's passed on to several HRs and there's a long process. So it depends on the organization. And I registered with Rapido within around 5 days. The complete vendor registration process was done. With TimesPro, again, they told me to empanel through their website. It was just done online. I didn't even have to go and ask someone for it. So it depends on the organization completely. It also depends on whether the organization is ready to take us. So that is another point which we should think about.
That's what. So this is what I'm trying to understand. You said, it also depends upon the organization is ready to take us. First of all, what I am of the understanding that HR are going to take the easy route, right? If there are vendors already registered with them, they're not going to go searching for new people. For whatever reason, if the existing vendors do not accept, then they go outside. So when you say the organizations are ready, what do you mean? On what criteria are they ready or not?
Ready in the sense they feel that you are the right organization for them culturally, as well as the right organization for them in the skill set basis, as well as the right organization for them on the budget basis. So all the three play a major role here.
Got it. And Indira, you said, at one point where there are quality trainers that come in, but then the budget is not matching with whatever the organization has set up, right? Have there been instances where trainers have not been selected because they quoted very low?
Yes, I have done that as well. And also when they quote low, if you look at their profile, the profile also looks low. So no trainer who was actually with that experience has quoted low till today. I have not seen that.
Not today. Okay, there hasn't been an instance where you found the trainer to be really good, but then you thought they're charging a little less. You didn't go. There was not a situation where you said, "Hey, you know what? We've got this much budget, so if you can raise your quote, it'll be good." That situation hasn't happened to you yet.
No, and even if it happens as an organization, I would always go with, okay, thank God they gave me a less quote, let me close them with that. Because I need to think about with how less budget I can close this so that I can take another project for the remaining budget.
Got it. And okay, let's say the vendors are not. I'm totally asking this from from a perspective of trainers who are starting off, right? When there are requirements, they go apply. But just on the other side, as an HR, what is the average number of applications that you receive from trainers once you put out a requirement out in the open?
It depends on what I'm hiring for. So if I'm hiring for something which is common like soft skills or team building leadership, yes, people just apply. Like within an hour, I would have got around 100 resumes on my mail. So that is how it works. But when it comes to core technologies like AI ML trainer or a
Right.
data science trainer, no, I don't get so many. I just get 2 or 3, maybe that's all. So I
Got it.
literally need to go and search where they are and find them out and bring them in. It is the other way around when it comes to technical trainers.
Got it. Got it. And let's say when it comes to soft skills trainers, where you get 100 resumes. Now, as an HR, obviously, I don't know. I don't think you're going to be seeing 100 resumes, right? You're going to keep seeing till you find the right match and then stop, correct?
No, I see all the resumes. I put all the right resumes at one place and then I filter
Oh, wow.
again all the right resumes.
You go through all the 100 resumes or whatever
Absolutely.
that's the number.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I
Okay.
might be missing out on some very important person just because I got an average profile thinking that that is the best profile. So it's always
Right.
best to go through all the profiles. But I don't know if all HRs do this. If this is for the entrepreneurs who are listening, no, not all HRs do this. It's just
Right.
me who's doing this.
Got it, Indira. Okay, let you tell me, as from your personal experience, what was the criteria you would look at resume? Because resume is literally the make or break document for them, right?
Yeah.
So, what were the moment you saw you would just reject, and what were the things that you would kind of keep it aside? Of course, apart from the credentials, I'm talking from an optics point of view or best practices point of view.
Okay. So it depends on the resumes they send, like how they have sent the resume. Have they just put it in WhatsApp and just left it like that? No, I'm not even going to open that. But if they have put a formal mail stating that I am from this background, I have been doing this for these many years, and I think my skill set matches with what you are looking for. If they are trying to give a personal touch, it means they are serious about the thing. Otherwise, they have just applied for the sake of applying kind of thing. So that is one thing which I look at. The second thing which I look at is their profile actually updated till the current programs which they have done? So as freelancers, we'll be doing so many programs at a time and we'll be associated with so many organizations. But have you mentioned the latest ones and have you mentioned the most important ones and your achievements in that is one thing which I'll surely look for. And I'll also look for whether the person is following me up once I do the first call. So I do the first call, they give their interview, they forget me. It means no, they are not, they have got some other project to do with, especially for freelancers. This is a fact to go with because as a freelancer, they have the freedom to apply to around 15 to 20 organizations just like yours at the same point of time. So only if the person is really interested, they're going to call you back and ask when is the program, what are the challenges you're facing. So when a trainer does a TNA and a TNI, like training need analysis and training need identification, that is when I really understand, okay, he is the trainer who's actually into the things and he wants to do the program. He's not here just to come, conduct the program and leave. He wants to do an analysis, find out what is the need of the training program and then prepare the training materials according to that. Yes, that is the person I'll surely take him.
Got it, Indira. And this might be a little basic, but I still want to, out of curiosity, ask. There are, the way resumes are sent has evolved over the years, right? Before it used to be a simple document, black and white and stuff. Today, there is so much graphic designing that goes in. There are pictures. in the resume, and there are video resumes today. So what is the right thing to stick to?
There is no particular right thing to stick to. The right thing you should stick to is the human connect. When you're able to connect to the person, even if your resume is not really attractive, if you have spoken the right words, which the person actually wants to hear from you for the program, then yes, you don't need to worry about what things you're sending.
Got it. And you said, you check if they have updated their recent training programs and all that, right? Now, the only source for you is resume as an information, right? Now, how would you have known whether, where is your cross verification? Is that their social media platforms like LinkedIn, or when you spoke to them on the phone, they would have told you, I have done these latest trainings. Is that how you verify? How is that?
Okay, the one which I told you is even before I call them or see their LinkedIn profile. So when you look at a profile, you can understand they would have mentioned their experience till 2021. So what happened after 2021 is missing in that resume. So
got it.
Yeah.
So having your LinkedIn profile is, now you're saying the LinkedIn profile is one of the most important checking points for any trainer if they want to get a project somewhere. That's the first thing that gets checked.
Yeah, but not really like it is the most important. But yes, I do check that.
Got it, Indira. Has there been any standout approach from trainers that really caught your eye so far? Any creative ways people have tried to apply? Has there been any such instances?
Yeah, one of the persons who actually applied for my organization, he has been trying to approach the HRs for a while, and I don't know, the HRs didn't respond. So he directly took my number from LinkedIn and he called me. So I was surprised, like, how can a person just call a CEO directly and ask for a job? But then I was really impressed with what he said, and he was a very senior person with a lot of experience. So I was impressed with what he spoke about, and yes, we immediately took him for the project. So he was a very talented person. I would have missed on him in case he wouldn't have called me and spoken. So yes, whoever is applying for a job, I think you should try out all the methods. There are people who chat with me through my Google as well. So when you go to Google and you type Meraki Training Solutions, there's a chat box which pops up. They chat through that. They chat through the website sometimes. And there are several ways in which they try to approach in case, they are not actually selected or they really want to get into it. They find ways to come and get connected to me.
Right. The instance that you said now is with respect to Meraki training, somebody who wanted to join Meraki trainings, not
no.
in your previous organization. Sorry.
So what we do at Meraki Trainings is we hire trainers for the corporates. So whenever we put up a post that we are hiring, we say we are hiring for Meraki Training Solutions because the payroll is through us. So yes, that is how I said they come to our organization.
Got it. But you only hire on a project-to-project basis. They are not like...
No.
Got it, Indira. Okay, so Indira, you joined your corporate, you understood how the processes worked and stuff like that. And can you walk us through the transition now from, working for an organization and then deciding to come out and start your own company, which is Meraki?
Okay. So, I would say it was a sudden transition. It was unplanned. I had no plans of starting up. I wanted to, but it was somewhere in the background. I had almost forgotten it as I got into the corporate journey. But then suddenly what happened is there was downsizing in the organization, and I was literally cut down from a salary of, more than a lakh to 30,000 or something. So
my God. Okay.
That hit me really hard. It hit my ego basically, because I was told that I was not performing well, and that's why I was given a lesser salary. That brought in the fire back in me that, okay, I'll start up and I'll show how things really work in an organization. And that is how Meraki started up.
Okay, this is something, thank you for sharing it so candidly and, openly, but it must have come. I think you must have thought, firing me would have been better than doing this. Is that correct?
He actually wanted to fire me. He did say that, why don't you look for another job? I can give you a month's time. I said, no, I like the vision and mission of this organization. I want to work for this organization, because once I join an organization, I don't see that as an organization. I see that as my organization. I see that as my vision, my mission, my goals. But then, because all these happened, like I was literally in tears that day when he said, "Why don't you look for another job?" But then I said, "No, I really want to continue working here." Then, because he felt that, okay, I am also, maybe I will be of some help to him, is what he felt, I think. I did continue, but then when my salary was hit, I felt my values were hit. He did not realize my value, kind of. So, yeah.
Okay, but it clearly, comes out like you did not agree with their comment about your performance. So what do you think exactly happened? Did they use the performance as a proxy? Was it really the truth? What's your take on it, Indra?
So, I don't want to get into the details of this. There was too much dirty politics going on over there, which I really
Right,
don't want to talk about. And
right,
also, there was, there were other people who came in for lesser salary and more experience, which
right,
he
right.
felt would help him.
Got it.
So, yeah.
No, got it. I mean, all I wanted to know was, performance was used as a excuse,
Metric,
basically.
excuse, basically. Yeah.
They did not kind of, break it down and show it to you, see, this is what, and all those things. It was just one plain thing,
It was
what.
shown externally. I mean,
Right,
I was not hired to do a lot of things which I did for the organization because they asked me to. But then,
right,
because I was doing those things, they felt I was not doing the things which I was taken in for.
right,
The
right.
strategy was not set in properly.
Just a little detour, to all the people who are working in the position similar to yours, what's your biggest takeaway? What would you like to share with them? What do they need to take care of to not let this happen to them?
There's nothing which you can take care of which will not let you happen, because this is something which, see, as a person, I could not do anything over there which could have actually helped me stay there. It was maybe the circumstance of the organization. So one thing which I could have done is reduce my salary and stay back with the 30,000, because the other employee was working for 40,000. But no, that is not me. That I know my value and I don't want to get down to that.
Okay, so let me kind of rephrase the question, Indra. So what I mean to say is, now in an organization, right, if things are very technical in the sense, it's all about optics. What you do really, it doesn't matter as much as a report would matter, or the numbers would matter and stuff like that, right? And you said that part of your job was something, but what you did was very entirely different. Now, I understand when you say it was circumstances. See, when you're in a company, you cannot be black and white. You know what? I was hired for this. You're giving me all these things. But after listening to your situation, should people start doing that? First covering their basis from a report point of view, whatever the key metrics that they were assigned, should they first prioritize that and blatantly refuse other things that come their way?
I think that will not help them, because one is they'll not be able to explore the other fields which are there in the corporate. Their exposure will drastically reduce. Secondly, like their value is also again gone down, right? When you cannot do the other things, like how can I expand your roles and how can I take you to the next level, kind of.
Got it. Got it.
So yeah, these black and white things will not work.
Got it. So these situations are inevitable if an organization decides to kind of downsize, and if they feel they're paying you more, this is inevitable, is how I'll take it at this point.
Absolutely.
Got it. So how has the journey since then been? Why was your mindset to start up on your own, and maybe you had a certain salary? Why you didn't want to go to another company and maybe continue with that package?
I did want to go to another organization and continue, but then when I was attending the interview itself, my heart and mind was still with the vision and mission of that organization. And I had actually got into what he was telling, and I was actually into the things. So, anyway, it is a dream, whether it's that organization or it's Meraki, I'm going to follow the dreams. So, my
Okay.
dream was to build an organization where we take up proper training programs, where that's why I say we scale up businesses through pragmatic training solutions. So there are a lot of training solutions which just happen for the sake of training, But when you look at a training solution, like I myself have been a trainer, I've been in the vendor's position, I've been in the HR's position. So I've been a trainee as well. So I understand from all the three perspectives of what is actually required for a training program. And I thought this should be implemented, and like the way people look at training should be changed. And that is how I started Meraki.
Awesome. Indira, so when you decided to, go on your own, start off Meraki and stuff like that, how easy or difficult was it? What are the challenges that you had to overcome to kind of get to the position that you are in right now?
Okay. So if you ask me challenges, yes, there were several challenges, but then I did enjoy all those challenges. That is one thing which I would like to say.
If I can, request you to keep it chronological, it'll be great, from the start point.
Okay. So I started by July officially, but from June, I started looking for clients so that I can start the training program. And my strength is networking, as I already told you. So one day I just opened LinkedIn. I just gave connect to all the HRs which I know in corporates. That didn't work. Next day I again opened my laptop. I went through the post which a few HR had posted that, I'm looking for a trainer and all these things. I applied over there, and that one clicked actually. I got 2 or 3 clients the same day because I almost applied for more than 100 posts that day, I think. That was the only work which I had for the day. So I did get connected to 2 or 3 people, and they are still my clients. I'm really blessed to have them, because if they wouldn't have, given those projects today, I won't be sitting here.
Okay.
So yes, so whoever have been my clients from the beginning till now, they are my clients. I have not seen any client walk away from me. There was only one client which walked away because they had other plans for business, like they wanted to take full-time people. But otherwise, there is no client who has left me.
Okay. And when you started off, you said you registered your company in July, but then you wanted to get clients and all that. How did you, go about kind of registering a company? Why did you feel there was a need and not continue as an individual?
Okay. I started as a freelance consultant. I wanted to continue as a freelance consultant only. Even then, I really didn't feel. But whichever corporate I spoke to, they asked, what is the name of your organization? Is your organization registered? What is the GST number and all these things? So that made me I have to register, otherwise I cannot grow. I can just stay as an individual, like a freelancer. That's all I can do. So that is when I had to register.
Right. So the vendor registration and the empanelment and all needs a company and stuff like that. So this is when freelancers go through other registered training companies to get in.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so you got your 2 or 3 clients in June. How has the growth been since then?
So it has been a tremendous journey. More than the external side, it was the internal side where I faced a lot of challenges. So whenever you start up, it is very important that you recruit the right people for your organization to see that their skill set matches with what you are actually wanting in your organization. So you might be very good at networking, you might be very good at doing all the things, but you cannot do everything always. So you always need a person who can particularly do, at least at the first level, all these things.
Right.
So that is one mistake which I really regret. I took interns who I thought can actually, take up things and, do the recruitment and all those things. But no, they were not efficient enough. Even after training, they could not do it. One thing is they were doing internships because their college has told them you should do internship to complete your MBA. So when they come with that mindset, no, it doesn't work. They come here for the sake of working, and everything is spoiled here. Your speed at which you are walking is completely affected by these people. So I took a lot of wrong people. One is interns, one is taking a highly paid person and thinking that that person can actually do all the work, but then it was again messed up by the person, by him dominating and giving this is how Meraki should go, this is how things run in Meraki. And your vision and mission is again disturbed. You don't even realize that because that person has created a very good impression on you and has influenced you so much that you believe whatever that person tells might be good for the organization. That is another thing. So most of my challenges were internal through the organization. When
Got
I
it.
go external, I did not face much challenges because I have already seen the external part of it as a trainer as well as a vendor. So I know
Right.
what I should talk as a trainer. I know what the vendor will hear and what the vendor will understand it as.
Got it, Indira. So, what are the changes that you had to do to fix things internally within your company?
So the first thing I had to do was fix the structure for hiring internally in my organization. So
Right.
I never did a background check. That is one mistake which I was doing till last year December. But now I've started doing a lot of background checks before I take a person, like call the previous HR and understand what they were actually into, call their manager and find out about them. And then I also take an behavioral round with them where I give them situational challenges which I face in the organization and how they would respond to in that case.
Right.
Like,
Right.
if how are you going to manage a team member who's arrogant? So they should have an answer for that. They should have the sense to think, okay, what will I do? So only if they have that level of emotional intelligence, they can actually survive any organization. For that matter, in life itself, it is your emotional intelligence which carries out 80% of your success, and your intelligence is just 20%. You don't need much intelligence. Intelligence just happens. So if
Right.
that person is able to keep the calm in the organization, have work as a team, you know, understand what I'm trying to tell him, understand the vision and mission. So that person is the right person to take in the organization. And yes, I have become very selective in taking people. It's okay even if I have just 2 or 3 people sometimes, and then it increases to 10 or something. But I want the right people in the organization.
Got it, Indira. I get it about the when you interview them, the kind of tests and the checks that you do. But does background verification really help? Can you give an example where background verification really helped in you not hiring the wrong person?
Okay. 1 second.
No problem. Please take your time.
Okay, 1 second. Yeah, I'm sorry. What was your question?
No problem. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. No, the way you will interact with somebody and figure out, by giving them simulations of situations, that's one thing. Can you share an example where, background verification really helped you from not hiring the wrong person?
Okay. Yeah, I did do. It was for one of the freelancers which I had to hire for a project. So I told him to refer two of his friends. And one of those people whom he already knows as a freelancer was also in my connect. So when I asked that person about him, he said that he usually takes the advance for the projects and leaves the projects in between. He just disappears. I was
Right.
shocked to hear about it. I wanted to know whether it's just this person's perspective or it was like everyone's. I should also take a opinion B, right?
Right. Right.
So I did check with his friends again, and they also said the same thing. And I thought, no, I'm going to take the wrong person and I'm going to get in trouble in case I do this. So background checks are really helpful, and that is something which everyone should do, irrespective of whether they are running their own organization or they are just a HR. It's important to do a background check.
Got it. Got it, Indira. And coming to, trainings, now you have a company which you run, because being a trainer as a freelance trainer is one thing and running a company is another thing. Do you still train yourself personally, or you just hire trainers and manage it like that?
So I want to stay in touch with training. So that is one of the reasons I at least go for a 1 day program in at least 2 to 3 months once. So
Right.
I want to stay in touch with training. Training is always my passion. Yes,
Got it.
so I do take it up. But 90%, 99% of my programs are done by my freelancers.
Got it. So where does your time and effort go into as far as Meraki is concerned?
My time and effort mostly nowadays is getting into training people into understanding who we are, where we are planning to go, and how they're going to help us get to that level. So mentoring the people in my organization is most of my time now. As I'm scaling up, it is these people who are actually going to be in the front end and help me scale up. So I spend most of my time on this and rest of the time on creating the strategy of how I can actually create a KRA and KPI for these people so that, they are on track with what they have to do and where they are going and where they are lagging. I recently also had performance reviews introduced. Like all these days, I was not having a official performance review. I used to just tell this is wrong, this is right. But when I started conducting these meetings specifically, they were able to take it more seriously and work on it because they felt, okay, there is a review. I need to present something in the review. So I have to do something for this week so that I can present in the review.
Got it, Indira. And what about client acquisition, sales, bringing in new clients? I was surprised that you didn't tell a lot of your time goes in acquiring clients. So how do you actually get your clients?
Okay, so my client acquisition happens suddenly when I feel, okay, nothing is working out. Just connect left and right to all the people I know around me. I am into networking. So I just even call my uncle, okay, what is the HR of your organization doing? Give me his number. Let me talk to him. So I sit and I do the networking, and that is something I enjoy. So it didn't strike my mind that I should even tell that as a part of my work.
Yeah, because one of the most surprising things for me is one of the areas where trainers struggle is to land projects, right? That is sell themselves. Absolutely. And then get projects. Yeah. But, having spoken to you, it seems like, okay, you know what? If I need 10 clients tomorrow, I'll sit and get those 10 clients. So it looks like, you have your way of doing it. So I think scaling up shouldn't be an issue for you, right? I mean, if you decide that tomorrow you need, you want to double your revenue and stuff like that, you have no problems. You shouldn't be having any.
I do have a lot of problems in that because if I want to scale up, it's not just the sales. It is also the operations. It is also the finance. It is also the people who are working here, whether they are ready to work that hard. So sales is just one part of scaling up. Like anyone can go and sell anything, but how are you actually going to prove that the quality of your
maintaining
service
the quality
is So even if I have only 5 or 6 clients, these clients should be happy with what I do. Like how I said, the client whom I'm in touch with, my first client and second client are still my clients till today, and I still get revenue from them. So that is the kind of value I add when I go to a client. So I know that my business will keep repeating once I take a client. They're not going to go away from me anytime until, my people somewhere mess up and they do something there. But again, even though I've had incidents where, like even last week, the trainers messed up. They came to the training program late and they did a lot of things because of which the client was angry. He called me and he was like, I don't want to give you any training programs, all this, blah, blah, blah. And then I immediately called all the trainers. I found out that they were not late to the program. There was some other program going on in the auditorium because of which the students did not come to the classroom. And there was a lot of things going on over there. So I called back my client. I explained him that these are the things going on. This is how, we can resolve it. I also created a group for all of us where we, put our attendance chats, everything now. I didn't do this before this. Only when I got this challenge, I realized, okay, we have to do all these things. And so, it is your service which matters the most to the clients. If you are able to bring a service which no one else can replace, then of course they're not going to go with anyone else. Anyone can provide a service. No one can provide that human connect with the service by seeing their organization as your own organization, by seeing their employees as your employees, seeing their budget as your budget. To tell you frankly, I have mail IDs for every organization I work for. They are my clients, but they have given me a mail ID so that I can use their internal portals to communicate with their people. I can use their email ID to send offer letters to their people. That is the level at which my clients believe me.
Got it, Indira. What are the top 3 services that you're approached for, ever since you started Meraki?
Okay. So the first service I'm approached for is soft skills training programs for both colleges and corporates. The
Okay.
second one is technical training programs, again for both colleges and corporates. And the third one is staffing solutions, where they need a permanent trainer inside their organizations. And they approach me to get trainers for them. Now I've also expanded to getting them developers and testers and engineers at all levels. I have also started staffing because the clients have started requesting for it. So I'm also planning to extend my another wing to staffing.
Got it. And what's your team size right now, and what's your plan for the next year or two?
Okay. Currently, the team size is 7. And I don't go with the number of people in the team, because when I had a team size of 2 itself, my team was doing the same revenue which the team of 7 is doing. So
Right.
it doesn't matter with the number of people you have, absolutely. That's one thing which I have learned.
Got it.
And where I'm planning to go ahead, are you asking it in terms of number of people, or are you asking it in terms of what I'm trying to expand on?
Yeah, both. Like, say, for example, you said you're going to be expanding a little bit on the staffing services as well. And now if you start expanding from your services point of view, you'll know that, you'll need so many people. For example, you said scaling up is not about sales, right? It's also about maintaining the quality by setting up systems and processes and stuff like that. So in that way, you would have thought, what, even if there are 100 clients outside of your office right now, you will need certain time to kind of scale up to a certain size. So from that point of view, I just wanted to know, okay, where do you see Meraki probably 2-3 years down the line? Realistically, if you still have to maintain quality and still, expand to 25 clients.
Okay. So yes, 25 clients is something which I already have. So yes. So something more than that,
Since you've been saying 5-6 clients, no? I just
okay, they are the clients who are currently working. Okay.
Got it.
So, to tell the roadmap where I am actually planning to take the organization, firstly, I got into training with the aim that, so my ultimate aim is to become an IT solutions organization. I got into training because I wanted to understand the technologies, what kind of trainings go on in organizations for a project, what kind of technologies are required to basically understand all the IT things. That is how I started into training. Now I want to move into staffing, where now I have understood what kind of people are recruited through training, as how I understood what kind of people are recruited, what are the skill sets required, and what trainings happen in case they don't have the skill set. So I have reached this level. Now I slowly want to move into website designing and digital marketing solutions and app development. So these are the things where I see myself maybe after 2 years. So in my 3rd year, I want to get into all these things. And I will soon be launching these as well by the end of this year, so that I am in a good stable level by the end of the 3 years.
Awesome, Indra. And you said you were in Chennai, and I think you've moved into Bangalore. Is it for your business?
Okay, my dad got retired in 2020, and he got retired in Chennai. Our hometown is in Hosur. So he shifted to Hosur, and the nearest city is Bangalore. So I just settled here.
Got it. Indra, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It was an amazing 1-hour session, the kind of stuff that you shared. Totally valuable. I think anybody who wants to get into training, this already, I envision this interaction as something that people need to watch for sure, to understand the nitty-gritties, especially the way you spoke about how organizations actually choose trainers. I think just that particular aspect will add so much, it'll help people change their approach and, correct themselves. And also, are you hiring, if there are people listening, are you hiring? What are you looking for? If you want to share anything on those lines, please.
Yeah, sure. I'm looking out for a lot of freelancers who can work with me as consultants, who can work with me as trainers, and any field you're into, soft skills or technical skills or digital marketing, any skills you're into, you can always apply through my website. Right. There's a contact us column in the website. You can always apply through that. And yes, you will get a project from us because we are into various technologies and various skill sets. And somewhere your resume will be useful to us.
Got it, Indira. Great. Great. It was wonderful chatting with you. And thank you again so much. I'm grateful that, you shared so much with me in this podcast. I wish to, get back to you 6 months down the line and see, what you're doing at that point. I'm sure you're going to be doing a lot more. And looking forward to having you again for a part 2, maybe.
Sure. Thank you so